The great hall was full of noise, but Mara heard none of it. She stood in the center of the room, her hands folded in front of her, her back straight. Around her, the elders of the Iron Veil clan sat in a wide half-circle. They spoke loudly. They gestured. They used words like failure and useless and embarrassment. They spoke about her as if she were not standing right there. As if she had already left. As if she were nothing more than a problem they needed to solve before the evening meal. 3 years. She had given 3 years of her life to the Stoneback clan. She had cooked in their kitchens, learned their customs, honored their traditions, and endured their cold stares. And now she had been sent back. Returned like a broken tool. The Stoneback heir had declared her barren, and the Iron Veil elders had believed him without asking a single question. Sela stood in the corner of the hall near the far wall. She was young, barely old enough to attend such meetings, but she was Elder Dern's granddaughter and that gave her a place in any room. She watched Mara from across the hall and felt something tight and painful settle in her chest. Mara's green skin caught the firelight. The long scar along her jaw, the one she had gotten as a child, the one she had always carried without shame, looked sharper in the orange glow. She was not crying. She had not cried when she arrived. She had not cried when they led her into the hall. And she did not cry now as the elders decided her fate in loud voices. The clan leader, a broadman named Alder, finally silenced the room with one heavy hand on the table. "We cannot leave her unattached," he said. "It reflects poorly on us." One of the older men stroked his beard. "There is the matter of the gate guard." Murmurs. Then a few low laughs. "Ro," someone said. "He has no rank. No land. No family name worth speaking of." Alder looked at Mara for a moment, then looked away. "Which makes him a fitting match." More laughter. Quiet, mean, satisfied laughter. Mara's jaw tightened. Just once. Then she released it. "Very well," she said. Her voice was steady. "I accept." The laughter stopped. They had expected tears. They had expected protest. They had wanted to see her break, and she had denied them that. She kept her eyes forward and her chin up, and she gave them nothing. Sela watched from the corner and thought, she is the strongest person in this room. The guard barrack sat at the far edge of the clan grounds, near the old stone wall. It was a quiet part of the settlement, away from the markets and the meeting halls. A few torches burned along the path. The air smelled like pine. Sela walked with Mara. She carried a small bundle of Mara's belongings and did not speak because she could not find words that were large enough. Ro was waiting outside when they arrived. He was tall, very tall, with wide shoulders and a calm, unreadable face. He had dark eyes and large hands and a stillness about him that made Sela think of deep water. He was not what anyone would call handsome by the clan's standards. He was too plain, too quiet, too ordinary in rank. He looked at Mara when they approached. He did not look at Sela. He did not look at the bundle. He just looked at Mara, steady and direct. "I was told about the arrangement," he said. His voice was low and even. "As was I," Mara said. There was a pause. Then Ro asked a question that Sela did not expect. "Do you consent?" Mara blinked. It was the first time something passed across her face that looked like surprise. "The elders arranged it," she said slowly. "I know," Ro said. "I am asking you." Sela felt her breath catch. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Yes." He stepped aside and held the door open for her. That was all. But Sela turned that small moment over in her mind for weeks afterward. The days passed quietly. Sela visited when she could. She told herself it was to check on Mara, but the truth was that she could not stop being curious about what was happening in that small set of rooms near the stone wall. Ro's quarters were neat and simple. There were no decorations except a shelf of smooth river stones along one windowsill, stones he had collected over years, Mara told her, from different places he had traveled during patrol. He had given Mara the larger sleeping space without being asked. He cooked meals every morning, plain but good, and left a portion for her before he went to his post. He did not speak much. But when he spoke, he said what he meant. One evening Sela arrived to find Mara standing at the small window, looking at something in her hand. It was a cluster of small yellow wildflowers, tied with a bit of dried grass. Simple. Wildflowers. Left outside her door. From him? Sela asked. Mara set them down on the sill beside the river stones. He does not say so. He never says so. She paused. They are there every few mornings. Sela said nothing. She sat down and looked at the flowers, and she understood something then, that a man who left flowers without claiming credit was a very particular kind of man. 2 months after the arrangement, Sela was walking through the market with Mara when it happened. They were passing the cloth stalls when 2 women from the inner clan circle appeared. Noble wives. The kind who wore their status in the set of their mouths. They looked at Mara, and then they looked at each other, and one of them smiled in a way that had nothing warm in it. There she is, the woman said, loud enough to be heard. The barren one. Did you hear who they matched her with? The gate guard. The nobody. She clicked her tongue. A perfect pair, I suppose. 2 useless things together. The other woman laughed. Sela felt heat rise in her face. She started to speak. But Ro was already there. He had been a few steps behind them, carrying a sack of grain from the supply stall. He set the sack down on the ground slowly. He straightened. He looked at the 2 women without raising his voice, without any anger in his expression at all. I would choose her again tomorrow, he said simply. I wonder, would your husband say the same of you? The women went still. Ro picked up the grain sack, settled it across his shoulder, and walked on. Sela stood with her mouth open. Mara stood with her eyes on his back, and the expression on her face was something Sela had never seen there before. It was not gratitude exactly. It was something older and quieter than that. Something that had been sleeping and had just stirred. It was on a cold night in the 3rd month that Mara told him the truth. Sela was not there for this. Mara told her about it the next day, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a clay cup. She had told Ro what she had never told anyone else. That the Stoneback healers had examined her and found nothing wrong. That she was not barren. That the problem had been the heirs and he had refused to face it, had chosen instead to point the blame at her, knowing she had no power to argue against it. The elders of both clans had accepted his word because he was nobility and she was not. What did he say? Sela asked. Mara was quiet for a moment. He did not say anything for a little while, she said. He just sat there. Then he said, she stopped. She looked at her cup. Then you were lied to and punished for a man's shame. Not a question, Sela noted. A statement. Said plainly, as a fact. And then? Sela pressed. And then he asked me what I wanted for dinner. Mara almost smiled. That was all. Sela thought about that for a long time. A man who believed her without hesitation. Who acknowledged the wrong without making it into a performance of outrage. Who then, simply and practically, moved forward. She was beginning to understand why the elders' punishment had gone so differently than they planned. The months continued. Sela noticed the changes the way you notice a season turning, not in one moment, but in the accumulation of small things. Mara laughed now. Not often, and not loudly, but at the edges of her mouth when Ro said something dry and quiet that she had not expected. She slept without the tight, watchful look she used to carry even in rest. She had planted herbs along the base of the barracks wall, small green things in straight rows, and she tended them every morning before Ro went to his post. And Ro, the nobody, the low-ranked guard with no family name worth speaking of, had been quietly, steadily building something. Sela learned about it piece by piece. He had been saving for years. Long before Mara. He had a plan for a small holding outside the clan walls, modest land, a proper house, something that belonged to no clan and answered to no elder. He spoke of it simply, without grand language. Just a place of their own. When Mara told Sela this, her voice had a texture in it that Sela recognized as wonder. The clan held its midsummer festival on a warm evening filled with torchlight and music. Long tables stretched across the clan grounds. Children ran between the legs of adults. The air smelled like roasting meat and warm bread. Sela was sitting near the fire when she saw the messenger approach Mara. He was from the Stoneback clan. Young, uncomfortable, clearly not enjoying his errand. He spoke to Mara quietly, away from the noise. Sela moved closer without being noticed. The Stoneback heir had remarried. His new wife had also not conceived. He was, the messenger said with careful words, open to reconsidering the previous arrangement. He wanted Mara to know. He framed it gently, as though he were offering her something of great value. Mara listened to the whole thing. Then she looked across the fire to where Ro stood talking to another guard. He was not watching her. He did not know any of this was happening. He was just standing there, solid and calm, the way he always was. She looked back at the messenger. "Tell him no," she said. "Tell him I said it," without hesitating. The messenger left. Mara walked back toward the fire. She did not look shaken. She did not look triumphant. She looked like a woman who had simply confirmed something she already knew. That night, she went to her husband. Not because she was told to. Not because anyone arranged it. Because she chose to. Sela learned this the next morning only from the way Mara moved, quietly, but differently. The same way the air moves differently after rain. She did not ask. Some things were not for asking. Some weeks later, Sela noticed Mara's hand resting on her own stomach. It was a small gesture. Absent-minded. Protective. The kind of gesture a person makes before they are even fully aware of what they are protecting. Sela said nothing. She watched and waited. When Mara finally told her, she said it simply, "I am carrying his child." Sela put her arms around her and held on tightly. Mara, after a moment, held on too. "When did you tell him?" Sela asked. "Last night." "What did he do?" Mara was quiet for a breath. Then she said, "He sat down on the kitchen floor. He put his face in his hands." She paused. He was not sad. He needed a moment for it. It was too large to stand up for. Sela thought of Ro, steady, quiet, unshakable Ro, sitting on the floor of his kitchen because joy had taken his legs from him. And she felt something crack open in her own chest, warm and bright. Word traveled the way word always does in a clan, fast, sideways, and without permission. By the end of the week, all of Iron Vale knew. Sela watched the reaction carefully. Some people came to offer genuine good wishes. Others came out of curiosity. A few came because they simply could not believe it and needed to see for themselves. The elder who had called the arrangement a fitting match, meaning it as an insult, heard the news during his morning meal and said nothing for a long time. Then he set down his cup and stared at the table. The two women from the market heard it and went very quiet. The Stoneback clan heard it too. Sela did not know what was said in their halls, but she imagined the heir sitting with the knowledge that the woman he had discarded, the woman he had labeled broken, was now carrying a child. She imagined that silence was not a comfortable one. Mara and Ro, through all of this, simply continued living. They purchased the land Ro had been saving for. They began building. Not quickly, not with fanfare, just steadily, the way Ro did everything. On weekends he laid stone. On evenings Mara measured and planned. The small house went up slowly and honestly, every part of it something they had earned. The autumn gathering was the first large clan event they attended together as a household. Not as an arranged pair. Not as a punishment and its recipient. As a household. Sela arrived early and found a good place near the edge of the gathering where she could see everything. She watched the entrance. When Mara and Ro arrived, Sela felt the quiet shift in the air around them. People noticed. People always notice when something they dismissed has become something they cannot ignore. Mara was visibly carrying their child. She wore a deep red cloth wrapped over one shoulder, her silver earrings catching the light. She walked the way she had walked in the great hall on the worst night of her life, straight-backed, unhurried, with a stillness that could not be taught. But there was something different now. Something that had not been there that night. She was not braced against the world. She was simply in it, and at ease. Ro walked beside her with one hand resting at the small of her back. not holding her. Not guiding her. Just there. The way a tree leans slightly toward the thing it has grown beside for years. The two women from the market saw them across the gathering. They said nothing. The elder who had arranged the punishment crossed the room. He extended his hand. He said something about wishing them well. Mara shook his hand and smiled, a real smile, gracious and easy, and then turned back to the conversation she had been having, as if his regret were simply a small interruption. She did not need anything from him. That was clear. She was not there to collect satisfaction. She was just there. Present, full, and whole. Sela stood near the fire and watched it all. She thought about the night in the Great Hall. She thought about the words they had used: failure, useless, defective, a perfect match for the nobody. She thought about what they had intended, to place Mara somewhere small and forgotten, among people they considered beneath notice. Instead, they had placed her beside a man who asked for her consent. A man who stood between her and cruelty without raising his voice. A man who sat on the kitchen floor when happiness was too big to stand inside. They had tried to punish her with the lowest-ranked men in the clan. And he had given her what none of the noble houses could: a home that was theirs, a truth that was believed, a love that asked nothing and offered everything. Mara caught Sela's eye from across the fire. She smiled, that quiet, edge-of-the-mouth smile that Sela had been so relieved to see return. Sela smiled back. She thought, they gave her to the guard as a lesson in shame. He gave her back herself. And she came home carrying proof that every single one of them had been wrong.